Hello, everyone. This is EJ Schultz, news editor at Ad Age, and welcome to the Marketer's Brief podcast. In this episode, we continue our monthly series examining purpose marketing hits and misses with Thomas Kolster, who is the founder and creative director at Copenhagen-based Goodvertising agency, which advises companies and organizations on how to turn environmental, societal, and health risks into market opportunities. Hello, Thomas.
Hello, EJ. Happy to join you today.
Welcome back. Let's get started on a positive note, as we usually do, with a few hits, things, ads, campaigns, initiatives that you think really hit the mark. And first up, let's start out with a beer brand. We covered this campaign on Ad Age earlier this month. It comes from Heineken. And essentially, it highlights its commitment to renewable energy by installing solar-powered billboard at Brazil's Rock in Rio festival. And this billboard did more than advertise. It actually cooled beer at a local bar. It was installed at Brutico, which is a famous bar in Rio located near the festival grounds. And the text on the billboard informed viewers, quote, "This billboard is cooling your Heineken. Cheers." Slightly gimmicky, but also somewhat practical. Why did you like this one, Thomas? And I'll remind everyone that you can see all these campaigns on adage.com. We'll have a post on this podcast, so you can see everything in one spot. But back to you, Thomas. Why did you like this one?
EJ, who doesn't like beers? That gets me already in a good mood when we talk about hits and misses. I mean, I think it sort of pivots that thing from being the usual, hey, look at us at Heineken, we're doing so much, we're investing in renewable energy, so making it super relatable and personal. I mean, if you live in Brazil, it's damn hot, you like a cold beer, and you suddenly see a really nice link between renewable energy and a cold beer. So I love that kind of stuff where you can sort of pull in people and make a really complicated issue relatable for them. So just spot on, in fact, and also that it's backed up by, bigger commitments, I think for me makes a lot of sense.
Right. This is not a one-hit wonder. And this is a constant theme on this podcast. Don't just do an ad, do something behind the ad. And they're certainly doing that with committing to using renewable energy in their brewing process. So well done, Heineken. Our next campaign, we're going to go sort of in your area of the world a little bit. In the Netherlands, we're a city called Haarlem. Is that how you pronounce the city? H-A-A-R-L-E-M.
I'm not good with Dutch. I'm Danish, but it sounds about right.
Okay. Well, this city, however it's pronounced, recently enacted a law that will actually ban meat advertising from public spaces. That's a radical move, but in their view, it's a way to tackle climate change, obviously getting at the environmental damage caused by raising and producing meat. But the real news that we're talking about, the campaign, it comes from a brand called La Vie, which makes a veggie bacon, so a meatless bacon. And they seized on this news with billboards declaring, quote, "Sorry, Haarlem, you can't ban this bacon ad." Why did you like this one?
I think it's smart in that sort of oldly kind of way where it's like an ad that talks about an ad. Plus, for me, it just provokes a response. It's such an interesting discussion, this thing about banning ads. And I think for a lot of people, that's just a conversation starter. I mean, across the world right now, we talk about banning fossil fuel ads, we talk about banning meat ads, what should be shown in the public space. And for them to actually go in there, tongue in cheek, take that conversation, I think it's a lot of fun. And obviously, for a lot of the other brands, the airlines and the meat producers out there, it's probably also a wake-up call, because how long time can they essentially stay quiet? So simple, fun, classic ad.
And also speedy, right? I think they turned this around within days. They maybe knew this was coming, I'm assuming. I'm not an expert on legislative process in this city, but I assume this had been on the docket for a while. So it just is a lesson for brands to keep your eyes open, even on government affairs, and see where you can get in the conversation in places that it makes sense, right?
Yeah, I think it's about staying relevant. And I think that's the thing about these sustainability topics. In fact, they move so damn fast. And I love how the brand just sort of intersects itself to a super relevant dialogue and just owning it and owning it with values. So clever, and something I think a lot more brands can be inspired by.
So speaking of climate change, our next hit is on the same topic, somewhat related. It comes from the retail grocer brand Lidl, which in Sweden is out with a fun print ad that it also plugs its decision to stop flying fruits, vegetables, and other food items to its stores. And the ad shows various birds that don't fly, like penguin, ostrich, I think. And it ends with a kiwi fruit with the description "stopped flying 3 months ago," which is sort of a nod at Lidl's decision, but also a fun play on the fact that kiwi, the birds, are also flightless. Basic print ad shows again that the print ads can still be relevant when done right. But why did you like this one?
I think you zoom in on something. I got to be honest, in a world that's just full of gimmicks, I sometimes just miss that really good print ad. And it's relevant, and it sort of plays on the notion that almost says that, it sort of makes the right choice high status. So if you choose things that aren't flown in, you're sort of the smarter one. You're not going extinct as some weird little bird sometime in history. So I think it's a good way of sort of, making the viewer smarter. And I think secondly also, again, which I think is a key message across all of these ads, is that there's a really clear commitment behind. Lidl is one of the supermarkets that actually do this right and wholeheartedly and have done that for a while, where a lot of the competition in Sweden still hasn't committed fully to saying we're not flying vegetables and fruits in.
Okay, our last hit is not really a campaign, but it's a major announcement that came out a few weeks ago from Patagonia, which of course has a long, long history of purpose-based marketing around environmentalism. But the next move, their latest move is probably bigger than most anything they've done in the past. Their founder, whose name I will let you pronounce, Thomas, just so I don't get it wrong.
That's right. Yvonne, I think.
Okay, there you go. You're the European here.
Exactly.
He pledged to turn over ownership of the company to two entities. One is called the Patagonia Purpose Trust, and the other one is called the Hold Fast Collective, which is a nonprofit dedicated to fighting for the environment. And in the press release, they say each year the money we make after reinvesting in the business will be distributed as a dividend to help fight the crisis. And the press release was sort of boldly titled, "Earth is our only shareholder." That kind of language might normally spark some skepticism from you, Thomas, but I think you categorize this one as a hit because you think it's real and it's meaningful, or give us your take on why you like this.
I think for me, it's sort of just in a way a full circle on the legacy of this amazing, inspiring human being, that started as a rock climber and now is sort of saying that I actually stay true to my purpose. And I actually do think that my companies should exist and thriving companies should exist to actually help create a thriving planet. And if you create a thriving planet, you can create a thriving business as well. So for me, this is just a full stop. It's a good nod. It's a staying legacy that not only shows that Patagonia has done some amazing commercial work, but now they also really prove through action that this truly matters. Can we learn something from it? Because probably 99.9% of brands out there won't be doing this, but I think it's sometimes worth showing a real lighthouse once in a while.
And, even if other brands can't go that far, it certainly, again, shows that you can take real action on things is the way to kind of break through. This certainly got a lot of attention, drew a lot of headlines. I'm assuming resulted in a nice little sales bump for Patagonia. We don't know that for sure, but there's that side of it too. After all, this is a marketing podcast, right?
I'm absolutely sure that they succeeded creating a global conversation, right? This story has been on every little front page across the world, and so for sure it has, and rightfully so. And I think what can other brands learn about it? The bar is rising faster every day, so you need to catch up. If you're not committed, then this is a call for change, right?
So on to our misses. We need to come up with some music or something to introduce the misses. Maybe
no scary music. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. The first one comes from a nonprofit called Project Everyone, and in partnership with Accenture's Karmarama agency, they unveiled a campaign called the World's To-Do List, which kind of is how it sounds. They literally sort of had a video that showed Post-it notes stuck on major iconic locations across the world, like the Great Pyramid, for instance. And then, the to-do list shown on the Post-it notes was all meant to tie back to the United Nations 17 Global Goals for Sustainable Development. I think there was some stuff on equality and the like. But why was this one a miss in your mind, Thomas?
I mean, this was correlating with the UN Climate Week last week, and which almost feels like it's the UN Climate Talk Week, because all that happens is talks. So obviously they want to encourage all of us to do more. For me, I think the idea is banal. I mean, it almost seems like student type work. I mean, who's the target group? Is it business leaders? Is it government leaders? Is it you and I? And what can we do about it? Because if it's the politicians and business leaders, we know what works, and that is public pressure. If it's to you and I think we're not going to change anything by a post-it that says end poverty. And there's so much good stuff in this space. I'm a little bit sorry about Kamarama taking this direction. I mean, there's an asset called Good Life Goals that actually does translate the United Sustainable Development Goals into something we can all do tomorrow. One of those things, if we talk about end poverty, is buy from companies that pay people fairly. If they just had written that on a Post-it note, I would at least have loved it a little bit. But it just seems like they're not trying hard enough. And it's sad, because this is definitely the time where we have a need for more doing than saying.
Okay, next up on our list is might be a surprising brand to make a Mrs. list, because they're behind so many iconic and well done ads. And we're talking about Apple. This ad that you do not like, Thomas, it's called Dear Apple. And it essentially features people reading letters addressed to Apple's top executive, Tim Cook, praising the Apple Watch for saving their lives, essentially. It's part of a broader campaign plugging features on the watch, such as those that, read your vital signs and the like, which is, of course, very useful. But we'll talk about the ad after we give it a little bit of a listen here. And again, reminding our listeners that you can watch all these ads on adage.com.
Hola, Apple.
Dear Mr. Cook.
Dear Tim.
Dear Mr. Cook.
Hello, Mr. Cook.
I'm writing to you from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
I'm writing you from Atlanta, Georgia.
Soy triatleta y soy invidente.
I am a 27-year-old high school teacher.
I'm a senior in high school.
I only had the watch for 2 or 3 weeks.
El reloj ha cambiado por completo la manera en la que entreno y compito.
I was viewing a movie with my wife in her family room.
I was having lunch at one of the spiciest restaurants in San Diego.
It was a typical summer night. I looked around the corner, and a bear was staring right at me.
I was doing what we call a dump and return when I slipped headfirst into the compactor.
I was skating on a frozen river when the ice gave out.
The door closed and everything went dark.
My longtime friend started grasping his chest.
I was fighting to catch my breath.
I used the watch to study my pulse, and it was wildly erratic. Things escalated quickly from there. I was getting tired, and I could tell hypothermia was setting in.
I go to grab my phone, but my pockets are empty.
I didn't have my phone on me.
As I was trying to figure out what to do, I looked down and saw my watch.
I placed my Apple Watch on his wrist, and I couldn't believe my eyes. An atrial fibrillation notification popped up. Holy cow.
Holy moly.
I looked down at my Apple Watch, and my heart rate was 187 beats per minute.
I drove him to the hospital where he was treated for a heart condition he wasn't aware he had.
Dear Apple, my dad was flying our small plane to Vermont. I was asleep in the back seat. I woke up when we were crashing into the tops of the trees. The plane broke into 6 pieces, and we were miles away from civilization in the freezing cold. Then, all of a sudden, my Apple Watch started ringing. I forgot I was wearing it. I told my grandma that I'd have to call her back, and I immediately called 911.
I whispered to my co-teacher, I need to go to the emergency room right now.
We were advised to head directly to the emergency room.
I held down the button and whispered, Siri, call 911.
I dialed 911 and that sucker started ringing, and I was smiling like a brand new baby.
Rescuers arrived in minutes.
If I hadn't had the Apple Watch, things could have been much worse.
I'm so grateful.
From now on, I'll never leave the house without it.
Es impresionante cómo este pequeño aparato me ha ayudado tanto en mi vida.
My doctor said it was your watch that saved your life.
Thanks for helping save my friend's life.
Since the heart event was without other symptoms, clearly the watch was my only call to action and my only link to the fine medical care that saved my life. With deep gratitude, Eric.
Thank you, Hannah.
Sinceramente, Marcos.
Bill.
Tayron.
Sincerely, Dr. Korn.
All the best, Shay.
Okay, Thomas, that ad, it's a little lengthy, but it would seem to hit all the elements that you normally would find in a successful ad, which is, letting real people tell the story. It's storytelling. It's talking about a product that provides a valuable service. We presume these are all real stories, but why didn't this one make the cut for you?
It's almost to quote the ad, holy moly, holy cow. It's just too much over the top. It's really not believable. I mean, it's almost like, Dear Tim 1984 seems a long way ago. And it's almost like they've gone down this 80s testimonial style advertising that Procter & Gamble was so well known for. And in some ways, Procter & Gamble have moved on, but for some reason, Apple went back that avenue. And I just don't believe that it just doesn't come off authentic. I mean, it's so sad to say because those are real stories. And the further out they go with some of those examples, the more I sort of cringe and I'm like, oh, come on, stop it. So I think the testimonial style is just not a way to go, and especially not for a legacy brand like Apple. So this is a clear miss, and I miss the good old days of 1984 when they did that sort of stuff.
Could it have been done without, referencing the CEO of the company? Would that have helped or not?
Oh, what would have helped? Probably made it shorter and not a story where you already know what's happening. I mean, you already have figured it out before it even starts. And I think that just makes it a very painful long ad as well. So it's tough to say, but I think it's back to the drawing board and try and come up with something else.
So not enough suspense, a little too long, a little too heavy-handed.
Yeah, it's too much of everything. It's sort of like when they start doing the same thing with adapters. It's just too much of everything. They need to go back to the simplicity that Apple is so famous for.
Okay. We've got time for one more quickly. Our last miss comes from a clothing brand called the Woolmark Company. And their global campaign is called Wear Wool, Not Fossil Fuel, and it aims to educate consumers about the dangers of synthetic textiles. And they do so with a video showing people emerging from an Olympic-sized swimming pool, which is not filled with water, but it's filled with oil. So picture these people walking out of this pool. They're filled with oil. They're slowly peeling off the oil, and then they emerge in these beautifully outfitted Woolmark clothes made from merino wool, which is what this brand specializes in, and it's plugged as 100% natural. There's no dialogue in this ad, so we won't play it, but you can watch the ad on adage.com. But Thomas, quickly, why did this one not make the cut for you?
Oh gosh, I felt it was almost too literal and talking down to me. Again, we've been talking so much about how too many ads these days sort of preach to the converted. I mean, if you're gonna pick up that lovely merino wool sweater, I don't want to feel talked down to with all these scenes of oil, etc. There probably should be a better story that you could tell. Maybe again, it's about making the product more high status, that you're the smarter one, that you chose this. And again, I would say this ad could have been executed probably more beautifully in a sense. I just think that it sort of comes off as a bit too preachy, and the execution doesn't really do a thing for me. Maybe it's just me. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, but I just don't feel that it does the job, unfortunately. Let's see on the sales.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on that. But we're going to have to end it there today. Thank you, Thomas. I want to thank our producer, Lauren Ciardio. That was Thomas Kolster, who is the founder and creative director at Copenhagen-based advertising agency. My name is EJ Schultz, news editor at Ad Age. I want to invite everyone to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite channel. We'll be back Wednesday with another edition of the Marketer's Brief podcast. And we'll have our next Purpose Marketing Hits and Misses in November. So stay tuned for that. Thanks again, Thomas. Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll catch you next time.